I wanted to welcome all of you to the Max. I know that for many of you, it's your first time here, and for a lot of others, you're here all the time, and so welcome to all of you. My name is Benjamin Douglas. I'm the Director of Programs and Strategic Initiatives here. I've also had the joy of pulling together this exhibition. First, I want to make special thanks to a couple of folks, the Max Events and Facilities teams who have helped move chairs and tables and set up mics and all the things that it takes to make this kind of stuff happen. Many thanks to y'all. Also to Robin Dietrich, our exhibition designer. Hannah Bien, who has had a big hand in preparation. Christina McField, who is our programs curator for today. And also to our director, Penny Kemp, for always saying yes. She had no clue what this was going to be, and she was just like, yeah, that sounds good. And so she's also here for an experience. We do offer lots of kinds of experiences here at the Max, not just days like today, where we have had all sorts of artist activations, classes, workshops, but those go on year-round. And you can always check those out at msarts.org/events. And we have an entire museum upstairs. And so if it's your first time in this space, I want to make sure that you know that this is only half of it. There's a whole lot of Mississippi culture and history upstairs that I hope you will take a chance to avail yourself of. After the talk, we'll have a Q&A, so if you've got questions that pop up during John's talk, hold on to those, and I'll come around at the end with the microphone. And then John will invite you all to join us in the gallery. So we'll just go straight in there and give you a chance to experience the worlds that he has created. Without further ado, John Jennings is a cartoonist, author, graphic novelist, curator, cultural theorist, professor, editor, and award-winning artist, to name just a few of the things he does. Many of you may be familiar with his highly acclaimed work as the co-author of the #1 New York Times bestselling Kindred, a graphic novel adaptation, or his other collaborations adapting Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents. Comic fans in the room might know him as the creator of Marvel's Silver Surfer Ghostlight, but that's just a tiny fraction of his work. He's often an invited scholar for documentaries and has been interviewed and featured on CBS Sunday Morning, Marvel documentaries, and his forthcoming compendium, co-authored with Angelique Roche, titled My Superhero is Black, illuminates Black characters and creators across Marvel Comics history. Originally from Florida, John attended Jackson State University before going on to earn 2 master's degrees, one in education and the other in graphic design. He then returned to Jackson State, where he taught graphic design, and is now at the University of California, Riverside, where he examines race in visual media. He teaches class on comics, horror, and Afrofuturism. In addition to his work at UCR, Jennings is the founder, director, and editor of Megascope Comics, an imprint of Abrams Comic Arts, where he publishes graphic novels focused on the experiences of people of color. Megascope's next release, in October 2026, is the graphic novel Framing Emmett Till by Chris Benson and Eric Battle, and that will have its worldwide book launch at the Mississippi Book Festival. Other prominent projects include founding the Schomburg Center's Black Comic Festival in Harlem, and his collaboration that's currently on display at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Before Yesterday We Could Fly, an Afrofuturist period room. John has earned some of the most prestigious honors in comics, literature, and the culture. Along with his collaborators, Jennings has won 2 Eisner Awards, the Bram Stoker Award, the Hugo Award, and most recently, the NAACP Image Award. What sets John's work apart from other world builders is that the world he creates have a specific purpose, inspiring liberation. By imagining places and worlds where people of the African diaspora are thriving, he helps make those futures possible. It's no surprise that this creative drive to create better worlds came from Mississippi, but now we're honored to welcome him home with this exhibition. Please join me in welcoming John Jennings to the Max.
All right. Somebody didn't start cutting onions up in here. Woo, okay, wow. Who you talking about? Who y'all talking about? I don't even know. All right, thank you, I saw you. He was like, I'm about to, Aaron was like, I'm about to fix that. Thank you. I can't even begin to tell you how honored I am to be here. The first time I came to the Max was a few months ago on a site visit. Blown away. I'm like, if you're from Mississippi, you need to be in this space. Even if you're not from Mississippi, you need to be in this space. I was extremely just, wow. You know, I've done a lot of cool things. I've been really, really blessed to do so, you know. Spoken at the Sorbonne in Paris, you know. Walked the streets of Kyoto several times, you know. Streets of Princeton, Yale, Harvard. Nothing like being here. I'm gonna try to get through this. I'm like, okay. I'm sorry about that. I'm trying to keep my composure, but I'm like, man, okay, I wasn't ready for all of this. Woo! All right, so I'm gonna give a long talk I'm gonna try to like truncate, all right? Because I've done this talk before, most recently at Colgate University, right? Yep, exactly. with our professor Lynette K. Stevenson, right? It's called Cyborgs and Crossroads. It talks a little bit about like my ethos for creating, but also, as Ben was saying, like liberation technologies that we can call stories or what have you, and I talk about that a little bit. A lot of the work that I do is in the area of what they call Afrofuturism. It's a term created by Mark Derry in the 1990s to talk about black science fiction. It was in the heyday of the birth of this thing called the World Wide Web. I'm not really familiar if y'all familiar with that, right? I know it was a time before the web didn't exist. I know, it's crazy, right? But he was wondering where all the black science fiction writers were, right? So for me, when I think about Afrofuturism, I think about like black folk, people of the diaspora, having agency to imagine a better future where we not only survive in the future, but thrive in the future on our own accords and our own agency, right? So we look at like science fiction, fantasy, horror, magical realism, Afro-surrealism as these spaces. And I'm gonna get into it. So first I wanna start by thanking everyone. I don't wanna, just, stumble over everybody, but Benjamin, of course, Christina, Hannah, Aaron, Josh, Penny, everybody, who's been instrumental in making sure this happens. Jeremy, everybody. So thank you again. The other thing I want to do before I start is I want to actually like celebrate the fathers who are in the audience. Could y'all give us all a round of applause? This is about to be Father's Day, Thank you so much. I'm gonna start with my little peanut. He ain't this little no more. This is the old picture. I do dunking on people now. He's like, so he's just turned 7. His name is Jackson, right? Jaxon. Jaxon. So the reason why his name is Jackson, for several reasons, because me and my wife met later in life, so we managed to get one in there, right? And so we had to make sure his name meant something, right? So my name is John, obviously, right? And what's the colloquial term for John? Jack, right? So he's Jack's son, right? Son of John, right? He's also, his middle name is Kirby. Any comic book nerds in the, Yeah, so his name is Jackson Kirby, and he's named after Jack Kirby as well, who is one of the greatest cartoonists to ever live. He co-created the Marvel Universe, Captain America, X-Men, right? Fantastic Four, The Incredible Hulk, co-created by Jack Kirby, also known as Jakob Kurtzberg. That's his real name, right? The other thing is that he's named for my grandfather as well. My grandfather's name was Albert, but he signed his name with an X because he couldn't read or write, right? But he believed in the technology of education, the technology of reading and writing, right? So he's also named for, my grandfather. The other thing I want to talk about too is that, a lot of times in culture, we take two things that are awesome and we cross them and we make better things, like PB&J, right? Reese's Pieces, two great tastes that taste great together. I love them. Soul music, what is soul music? R&B and gospel, soul music, right? So a lot of times when you take two things that seem like they're different and you cross the stream, so to speak, you come up with something pretty amazing, right? That's where interesting lives, at the crossroads, right? And we know a lot about that, as far as like the blues and gospel and all the different amazing culture that come out of this amazing state, right? And I make stories that are remixes of different types of other disparate pieces, right? I'm a hip hop scholar, but I'm also like an avid fan of gospel and blues and all the different music, right? And it also colors, pushes my work, Anyway, so I had never heard of Afrofuturism before, so until like around the early 2000s or so. Again, the term was coined in like the early 1990s. It was in an article written by Mark Derry, actually a white scholar, wonderful human being. I love Mark, by the way. And he was asking questions about like who was using technology, right? Who was using technology and who was writing science fiction. At the time, you only had people like Octavia Butler, Samuel Delany, Stephen Barnes, only a few. But he had more of a kind of a smaller view of what science fiction is, because he wasn't thinking about people like W.E.B. Du Bois, who's writing science fiction. He wrote sci-fi as well in the 1920s. My imprint Megascope is named after a device that he created in a piece that was written in the early 1900s, actually. There was a science fiction piece by Du Bois that was just in his papers, unpublished, right? Toni Morrison, I think, writes speculative fiction, right? Beloved is a ghost story and a haunted house story, If you look at like Zora Neale Hurston's work, the work of County Cullen, right? You see what I'm getting at, right? All this different work was happening way before the term science fiction was created by Hugo Gerns back in the 1920s, So I was doing this work because I was coming off of an artist residency at, I think it was at James Madison University, and I was about to go to Kyoto to curate a show. And I was really into like Japanese like techno culture, and manga and stuff like that. And I was reading, rereading the Cyborg Manifesto by what's her name? Anybody got it? Haraway, thank you, Donna Haraway. See, Donna Haraway. And also I was reading The Fact of Blackness by Frantz Fanon. I was rereading it, and I was thinking a lot about the reproduction of stereotypes, of black stereotypes. My work is about black folk and about black experiences and our relationships to systemic issues around racism, oppression, what have you. That's what my work's about. But I do it with science fiction and with comic books, right? Because comics are kind of subversive, but we'll get into that. Anyway, while I was there, so James Madison University, they called me in as a diversity in resident scholar, because back in the day, diversity meant you could get something funded, right? So I was the first one. And what happens is you would go there and you would teach there for like 2 weeks, and then you would come back and you do like an art show or something like that, right? But I didn't want to just like do old artwork. I wanted to create something new just for them. So I was thinking about the reproduction of stereotypes, Does anybody know where the term stereotype comes from? The print, yeah, what?
It comes from when they used to make newspapers.
That's right. It's from the printing part. It's a printing term, right? Because if you have like a big block of text, you make a stereotype to reprint it over and over again, so you don't have to reset it. Very good, A+, right? The word stereos means hard or fixed It means hard or fixed. It's about fixity, right? Everybody gets stereotyped, right? It's this idea of like how you actually fix someone in a particular idea. We don't really think about the way that we think about it until like the mid-20s. It was kind of reconfigured by the newsman, Walter Lippmann, right? Because we had all these people moving into the city, and we started to typecast them, right? This person is this person is this. And most of our lives, we're trying to wriggle out of those prisons. We're trying to wriggle out of those stereotypes because we have our own stories that we want to tell, but also we have people that want to tell stories about us that fix us. Am I right? Everybody, that happens to everybody, class, race, gender, what have you, right? So I started making these images called Matters of the Fact. And when I tell you, when I started making these images about black folk, and I started thinking about the stereotype, right? So the stereotype has two parts. You have the part that is real, that is us, and you have the part that is constructed. And so you're pushing against those different pieces of yourself, right? So I started to make these images that were inspired by actual daguerreotypes, actual stereotypes, right? And they started coming out of me, right? They started coming. So I did 70 images in 4 days. I barely slept. It was like something was inside of me, flowing through me, right? And so when I saw my friend Dana Rush, who's an Africanist, she said, "These look Afrofuturist." And I was like, "You are making up words." That is not a real thing. What are you talking about? And I looked it up, and I was like, oh, man, okay. So if we're talking about black folk in the future that are using cybernetic metaphors, that is what I was doing. So, and then when I realized I was actually part of a continuum. I wasn't by myself thinking about this, right? And before you know it, and this is like 2008. This is way before Black Panther broke out. This is way before, Lovecraft Country. For a decade or so, like an enclave of black, and well, actually everybody, independent scholars have been studying this phenomenon way before it moved from the fringe to the center, right? So now you can go into like Netflix and say, hey, I have this romantic comedy, it's Afrofuturist. And people are like, oh, okay. Like Black Panther and Friends, what is it, right? Exactly. So one of the things I came across was this film by John Comfra. He's an African man who lives in England, and he was studying black digital music, so stuff like Underground Resistance, a guy named Gerald Tricky, all these different like trip hop and stuff like that was coming out of like digital music, and its connections to like science fiction. So in some ways, he was actually saying that black science fiction lives in music. And I was like, whoa, hadn't really thought about it that way. So it's a documentary, and see this gentleman right here, he's what they call a data thief. So he created this idea of a data thief that's a time-traveling archaeologist that's trying to put together, through the detritus of time, black culture, right? He's trying to put together shards of shattered black culture so he can actually like give it back to us. Isn't that wild? So he was like the narrator. And so at the beginning of it, if you go and see the trailer, he's at the crossroads. This is a British dude. He has a thick British accent. He's like, yeah, let me tell you about this other bad boy hustler. His name was Robert Johnson. He went down to the crossroads, and he made a deal with the quote-unquote devil, right, to become a better blues musician. And this entity gave him a black secret technology, and that technology was called the blues. And I was like, because I had never thought about the blues or like music or black culture as a type of technology. We think about this computer, the supercomputers in our pockets that we take for granted every day now, right? As technology. We don't think about our language as technology. We don't think about our music as technology. We don't think about our recipes and the things that we carry around us as types of technology, because these things actually help us make sense of the world. The story is the first technology, right? Before we became scientists, we were storytellers, Before we understood that the sun was a star, we thought it was a god traveling across the sky, pulled by horses, right? In Egypt, we thought it was going to be consumed by Apep, the great serpent. Those are the stories that we told each other to make sense of the world. And now we have different sensibilities, right? But we still have those stories inside of us, right? So I made a series of images called Thief at the Crossroads because I'm what they call a critical maker. So I've written books and stuff like that, but a lot of times what you do is like once you do research, you embody it, and then you turn it into something creative. You make a play about it. You make a poem about it. You make a dance piece about it. You make a comic book about it. That is a critical educational academic process, right? Critical making. Comes out of the industrial design parlance, right? So what I did to understand what I had just watched, I made artwork about it. So I made 12 images of great blues players and blues singers, and I showed it at Gallery 1 in Jackson State a few years ago, right? Howlin' Wolf, right? You might recognize these people, right? So another thing that I came up with, because I like making up words, when you think about like, well, that's what we do in the academy, we make up words and then we prove that they exist. That's what we do. It's hypermigration. Really, tell me more about this. Anyway, so Sankofaration is a term. I love portmanteaus, right? Not more portmanteaus, but portmanteaus, right? Like smog, smoke and fog, smog. It's a portmanteau, right? Two words that you make a new word from. Sankofa is the Akan term that means go back and get it. It means go back and get it. It's never too late to learn from the past. So what we do as entities, as people walking around, we take the culture and we give it forward to the people that come after us. That's what we do. That's what every one of us does in one way or another, right? Sankofa, that's the name of it. Oration comes from the term narration. Because what I started to see was when we do things that are considered Afrofuturist is that we're trying to go back to the past and bring it forward to teach new generations of people. That's what we do. That's what we're here for, right? So, at the same time while all this is happening, I'm actually making books. So it's wild because when you find your tribe, it's nothing like it, right? It's like, wait a minute, you doing this too? Are you doing this too? It reminded me not to be all like highfalutin or whatever. It reminded me of what it must have felt like to be in like the jazz era, like when Miles Davis, stumbled across like Coltrane, like, hey man, you want to jam, It felt like that, Or you look at something like the Black Arts Movement, Langston Hughes is hanging out with Zora Neale Hurston real tight, You're like, this, you find your people. That's what happened to us because when I was discovering Afrofuturism, so was Ronaldo Anderson, so was Yatasha Womack, so was James Peterson, so were all these different people, right? And I became the arbiter of the aesthetics of this particular movement. It was weird. I happened to be in the right place at the right time, So I ended up becoming a visual voice for these particular stories. Like I said, my background is in graphic design, but I'm also an illustrator, and I was doing all these book covers and like posters and visual essays about Afrofuturism. It just happened that way, And in some ways, I became like a central figure in this work. It's weird. Because I just did a talk about like the history of Afrofuturism, and I keep stumbling over myself. It's weird. Yeah, but there you go. Anyway, the other thing that I came across was back in 2015, because I realized a lot of people who were like organizing on the ground around Black liberation and what have you, they were making sci-fi at the same time. I said, oh, this is the Black speculative arts movement. It's happening right now. And as you can tell from the retweets, it really caught on. It went viral, super viral. Nobody was caring at all. I said something important. Anyway, yeah. Being a famous theorist is like being a famous dentist. Remember that, okay? So anyway, but it did catch on, actually. And so now the Black speculative arts movement has like nodes all over the world, actually. And also one of the lead Afrofuturists he went to Jackson State. His name is Ronaldo Anderson. Forgot what piece of Mississippi he's from. But we went to school at Jackson State. I used to throw parties as an alpha, and I used to do the flyers by hand. That's right. And we still working together. Anyway, I'm not going to even hardly, okay, you know what? This is a talk I gave him before. I want you to look at these images, but this section is so complex, there's a whole nother essay, so I'm gonna go through it. I mean, a whole nother talk, so I'm just gonna kind of show you images, okay? I might do that a couple of times, because I don't want to burn up time. Ask me about this later. So. As you can see, it's a lot of it. So other thing that I thought about, because when Afrofuturism did break wide with this movie called Black Panther, I don't know if you've seen it before. Everybody's like, oh my God, Afrofuturism. I did 22 interviews about Black Panther when that movie came out. Because everybody's like, what is Afrofuturism? What is Black Panther? What is Marvel Comics? It was crazy. Is it the same as the Black Panther Party? I was like, no, it's a different, those are different, seriously. I'm like, no, this is a different thing. All right, so, but it went from like a fringe movement to something that was more centralized, like almost overnight, because Marvel is massive, right? It's like, oh, you know, and our imaginations colonized Wakanda. Wakanda's made up, but now everybody's mind is like, oh, shoot, we're about to go to Wakanda. Let's get some vibranium, you know? And the thing that started happening, though, that anything magical and mystical and black started to be couched as Afrofuturism. It's really black speculative culture, right? But that doesn't come out, it doesn't feel good in the mouth. Anybody in marketing, you know, it's like, I don't know, black speculative Afrofuturism. Ooh, okay. Let's put a trademark on that. That feels good. Thing to remember, though, about culture and about cultural movements is that insiders see content. Insiders see content, outsiders see form. Insiders see content, outsiders see form. Form is way easier to sell. The package is always like shiny. But we're far more complex as a people, everybody. We can't be sold to each other because every one of us is a universe. You know what I'm saying? Every one of us is a universe. How do you sell that? You can't. So you have to diminish it, you know? So what started happening was they started couching everything on Afrofuturism. So me and my friend Stanford Carpenter was like, well, what about horror? What about, because Kindred actually, I feel, is more like a Gothic narrative, actually. It has more of the trappings of a Gothic narrative. You got the twins, you have like the weirdness, this kind of strange coupling and relationships and stuff. You have the strange artifacts. It feels more like a Gothic piece. So we came up with this term, the ethnogothic, to explain looking at like cultural differences that are kind of displayed through like hauntings and ghosts and monsters and stuff like that. That's actually part of our culture too, right? So everything doesn't have to be Afrofuturist, you know? And you know, I'm a pedagogue, so I'm thinking about like, well, how do we couch it? How do we talk about it, right? So anyway, so I started making a lot of scary stuff. So my whole thing is like, to explain what ethnogothic is. Anybody familiar with Erykah Badu? Yes. Okay. You know her song Bag Lady? Yes. It's like, bag lady, you gon' kiss your fun. Right? Right? So what's she doing, right? So the song is about a bag lady who's dragging stuff behind her, right? She's trying to get to that bus, right? What's in those bags? Trauma, being hurt, not being able to let go of the pain, that kind of stuff, right? And what does Erykah Badu say she got to do? Let it go, let it go, let it go, let it go, right? It's cathartic. So we do this work with the horror, with the scary stuff, to actually like name that monster so you can actually control that monster, let it go, get on that bus that's going to the Afrofuture. I think of the Afrofuture as a destination, too, right? And that's why I work on the scary stuff. This is my boy Frank Half Dead Johnson. Y'all about to meet him in the show. So I was really interested in the Great Migration, you know, when I was teaching at the University of Illinois, and I created a character to explore the Great Migration. His name's Frank Half Dead Johnson, Francis Lee Johnson. That's his mama name. So his mama named him, but he's the fictitious cousin of Robert Johnson, right? You know how Robert Johnson went down to the crossroads to learn how to be a more virtuosity in, you know, blues guitar, right? Yeah. He went for revenge. His family is actually like murdered in front of him. Sorry. 1920s Mississippi. It's a racial violent thing that happened to Robert. So he escapes, right? And he gets drunk on moonshine, goes down to the crossroads, and he wishes for revenge. And then he regrets it, right? And so now, the quote-unquote devil, Scratch, he works for him because he realizes, like, oh, this dude is actually, like, pretty slick because he tries to trick himself out of, like, you know, selling his soul. So he actually gives him half his soul back, you know? And now he's composing a tune to keep the devil company in hell called the Lowdown Devil Blues. So that's the story, right? I actually it's based on my Mississippi heritage, my interest in Chicago. These are different iterations of it. I want to show this because this whole story is about process, right? And so there was he had a crow actually when I first started. He had this spade on his head. This is a totally different iteration of the character. And what I wanted to show is once you start sketching things out, they change over time, you know? What's wild to me is and this is really wild to me. So when I talk about the show, it's like my creative underbelly is, I feel like a turtle upside down right now. Because there's so much stuff that I would normally show to people, like my crazy handwriting and my sketches and how I think about storytelling and stuff. It belongs to me, but I'm sharing it with you. It's a very intimate show that you're about to see, right? I don't usually do that. This is a sketch, by the way. This Kenny Dreadful, that's a sketch. You see the sketches in it and stuff? I wouldn't normally show that, you know, but they took us we're gonna make up, it's gonna be everywhere. I'm like, oh my God. Oh no. You can see my sketch lines, oh my God. You know, that kind of thing, right? There was a version of Frank getting beat up, and it's very much if you ever seen if you know Easy Rollins, the character by Walter Mosley, and imagine him fused with John Constantine, that's who the character is, okay? Yeah, but it's old versions, this is so many versions of this character. We decided to do it in black and white. So the next thing I want to talk about right quick is Box of Bones. So Box of Bones is a series that I created with Ayize Jama Everett, really wonderful writer. And this was inspired by just the rampant violence against black men, against black bodies, and also the lack of justice when it comes to when black men or black folk are murdered, blatantly. My whole thing was well, what happens? What happens when we don't get justice? Where does it go? What happens with it? Does it explode? Right? So my whole thing is I don't know, I was just really angry. So we created this thing, called Box of Bones. And my friend Ronaldo Anderson asked me, have you ever heard this poem called Black Dada Nihilismus by Amiri Baraka? And basically, Amir Baraka was angry back in the day too. He was talking about what was happening to black folk in America. And he decided to make something about it. And he's like, I'll just become the thing that you say I am. I'll become the monster that you are putting on me, right? And so Box of Bones is about a young black woman from the South. She's researching these racial violence pieces that are happening around the world. And her grandfather is a blind blues man, and he talks about how he was blinded by this creature that lives inside this box. And she thought it was just a spook story, right? But then when she started doing her research, she realizes this box appears across the diaspora. And everywhere where black folk are hurt, it pops up. Some people call it the shadow box. Some people call it the black box, but most people call it the Box of Bones. But the thing is, though, is that if you ask for these spirits to come and aid you, you owe it something. Because there's a difference between revenge and justice, right? Right? So that's what the story is about. Now, up until last year, it was optioned by Warner Brothers for development to a television show. I was like, why are you going, this is really black and angry. Are you sure you want to put this on TV? I'm like, anyway, so what I did actually was take the stereotypes that have been put upon black folk, and I pushed them to the most terrifying piece that I could go, right? The one that scares me the most, this is the burden. It represents slavery, child slavery. What it does, it eats black limbs and it feeds itself. It's like a cotton sack that consumes black bodies. This is the Night Doctor. It's an old story to keep slaves in line, but it also deals with medical apartheid. That's the dark, that's the Nobody. It's about the hollowing out of black culture. I got it from the song Nobody Knows the Trouble I See, right? All right? That is the Wretched. The Wretched is a sentient lynching tree, right? So we did this as a collection over a period of time, using images of black folk throughout history as inspiration. So check it out. There's 2 volumes of it, right? I started working with like other artists and stuff, and also, just codifying how these images feel, right? How does it feel? I was trying to get past the pain, so I can move into the future, right? I did the coloring on most of the work, This is the first time I actually art directed other artists and stuff. And honestly, and it's together it's 300 pages. It's like 2 volumes of it. Really proud of the work. Rosarium Publishing is our publisher, the same people that published Blue Hand Mojo. And yeah. So really quickly, and this is when it gets real heady, sorry. Diegetic prototypes. Anybody heard this term? Okay. Ever heard the term diegesis? All right. Storytelling, right? It's about this idea of things that are created to hold stories and tell stories and transmit stories. So diegetic means that it's telling a story. So if you study industrial design or graphic design and stuff like that, you create these story worlds, right? For instance, if you are creating like a product, you create a world that this product would exist in to test it out theoretically. So that's what they call a diegetic prototype. It's not meant to be produced. It's meant to have a conversation about what's possible in that space. Does that make sense? Yes. Okay, all right. So design fiction is that process. So I'll create design fiction. You take a technology, you create a world, and you test it out theoretically. Okay, that makes sense? So what I started to figure out was there's diegetic prototypes inside of science fiction, right? So for instance, the time machine is a diegetic prototype. It's created to talk about, well, what if we could time travel, right? Because science fiction is the what if. It's like, what if robots were real and they wanted more life? Then you get Blade Runner, right? What if, they could come back and they could time travel and they wanted to kill this one woman named Sarah Connor? You terminate. You see what I'm saying? That's design fiction. But for the most part, you haven't really seen a lot of black design fiction. But then I started looking for diegetic prototypes that were in like black fiction. And the other thing I started thinking about is that one of the most powerful constructions or one of the most powerful technologies is the technology of race. Because it's not real. It's a fiction, right? It's a social construct too. We have biological, things here or there as far as our hair, how much melanin we have in our skin, our eyes, what have you, right? But there's a component of it that actually is made up, And that particular creation changed society, right? That's the notion, that's what we call a fictive novum, a new idea. Think about the car, or like electricity. When we found these different technologies, they changed everything. That's what they call the technologiad, right? I didn't make that word up, right? You have these things that change history, right? We needed race, right? Because we needed to justify chattel slavery, right? That's what happened. It's a technological advancement that has changed everything. So it is science fiction. So I taught this course at University of Buffalo called Race as Science Fiction, right? And I also curated this show at the Schomburg with my friend Ronaldo called Unveiling Visions, The Alchemy of the Black Imagination, where we started thinking about these diegetic prototypes and how they manifested themselves. So we did this in the Lewis Latimer Gallery. Lewis Latimer was a famous black inventor, and it's a circular gallery. The Schomburg is like Wakanda. Anybody familiar with the Schomburg? The Schomburg Center is in the center of Harlem. It's across from the Harlem Hospital. It's down the road from Apollo. It's catty corner to like to the Studio Museum. It's on Malcolm X Boulevard. Some of Langston Hughes' ashes are in an urn buried under a cosmogram of the Negro Speaks of Rivers in front of an auditorium that's named after Langston Hughes. It's blickety black. It's one of the blackest faces. It's like, oh my God. And then you have like, then you also have like, what is it, the Red Rooster across the street. The Red Rooster, right? So it's like, oh my goodness, it's Mecca. Yeah. Paintings by Aaron Douglas hang on the wall. It's a repository of the Harlem Renaissance. It was started by Arturo Schomburg 100 years ago to archive the Harlem Renaissance, right? Please go visit it. It's beautiful. It's a national treasure, right? So they let us do a show there. I'm going to talk about this later, why it's so important. I'm really inspired by Sherry Renee Thomas's work. She did the first big book on like black science fiction. It's called Dark Matter. It came out in the year 2000. Kevin Young, who used to be the head of this particular space, he was also the head until fairly recently of what I call the Blacksonian, you know, the National Museum of African American History and Culture, the Blacksonian, right? Kevin Young is also a poet. He came up with this idea called the shadow book. The shadow book is a book that haunts the existence of another book, like the third iteration of the parable series. Parable of the sower, parable of the talents, parable of the trickster never got written because why? We lost Octavia Butler before she could finish it, right? There was never a follow-up to Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. W.B. Du Bois always wanted to write this thing called the Encyclopedia Africana. He died before he got a chance to finish it. These are haunted books. They're shadow books. And of course, when I think about the world building, I say, okay, it's a shadow library, there's a shadow building, there's a shadow city, there's a shadow world. See what I'm saying? The fictive novum, you see? That's world building. W.B. Du Bois I created this idea of the veil too. The veil was a space, this other universe that black folk that we lived inside of that we could pierce through. You know, we were invisible but also hypervisible simultaneously. He also created the idea of the megascope, right? A device that could see through time and space. We created this in 1908, right? So these are things that actually started to fuel how I thought about my own work. So I came across this idea that I call critical race design studies, an interdisciplinary design practice that intersects critical race theory, speculative design, design history, and critical making to analyze and critique the effects of visual communication, graphic objects, and their associated systemic mediations on racial identity. Whew, that's one word, that's one sentence, right? So that's my critical framework, right? Because, and the thing that made me think about it is like, any graphic designers in here? Well, yeah, no, that's, yep. So when you're doing a design for like a large corporation, don't they give you a design standards manual? That's right, a lot of people nodding, right? So, during Jim Crow, those signs that were legal, that said no blacks, no Jews, no dogs, whatever, right? Those were municipal signs. They were designed by somebody, they were typeset by somebody, they picked out a typeface for those things, right? That was design being used as a manifestation of a particular ideology in print, right? So when I think about the I am a man signs that were used in the protests during the sanitation worker strike, that is pushing back on that design. The other thing we think about when we think about slavery, besides the manacles and the chains and stuff, we think about that outline of the slave boat with all those little bodies placed side by side. That is actually like what they call information design, right? People are nodding. So what I've been trying to do is create a design that disrupts that type of design. That make sense? Okay, all right. So I started finding diegetic prototypes in black literature. I got excited. You see how excited I got? Will the Circle Be Unbroken? The Afro Horn. This is by Henry Dumas. This is written in 1966. Mchawi this is a shoe that can actually make you fly. This is actually like a short story by Amiri Baraka. Black No More by George Schuyler. It's 1931. The Pig Detector, right? Helps you like find cops that are undercover, right? That's what that is. The Megascope. So black people were speculated into existence, and that speculation was supported by generations of visual culture and design propaganda. And then we, the speculated, have used that same technology to critique society and the persistence of our disenfranchisement, right? So the work that I do is about trying to disrupt those systems, you know? I do it out of love. I do it out of love for everyone, but I also do it definitely for the love of like black folk existing in the future, and not just surviving in the future, but thriving in the future, right? So, I'm not gonna talk about the comic stuff. One of the things outside of me being a father of my little boy Jackson, right, is they invited us to the Schomburg to create a black comic book festival. Pre-COVID, it would bring in 15,000 people, totally free, over 2 days, right? Black independent creators. No Black Panther, no Black Lightning, no homegrown characters by Black creators, for everyone, right? 2 days. It used to be MLK weekend. We did it for like, oh my God, like was it 13 years, something like that, And let me back up for a second. So I saw this interview with, with Bell Hooks, the late great Bell Hooks, and also with, what is his name? He's out of Chicago. He's a potter, but he does, you know what I'm talking about? Theaster Gates. Theaster Gates he was in residence at the New School, right? And they were talking about the idea of what the MFA gives you. It's fun. It's like the Master of Fine Arts gives you. And he said that, because what Theaster Gates does now is like he's taking the work and he actually buys old buildings in Chicago. He refurbishes them for use for the community now. It's really wonderful work in Chicago. But he says, I'm still a potter. Because, he was trained as a potter. He works with his hands to make like vessels. He said, I'm still making vessels. I was like, oh, snap. I never thought about it, because you learn a particular practice when if you get an MFA, it's like a terminal degree in art, right? But you don't have to write a thesis or what have you. You have to make art. You make a lot of art, right? And it becomes like the process becomes part of you. Like when I think about the process, it's like it's in my system now because of the practice, right? So I'm still a graphic designer. When I started thinking about this, but my particular project was to redesign how we look at the Black subject. And I didn't think about that until I started interview with Theaster Gates and Bell Hooks. So what I'm getting at is like, over a period of time, look, this is what it looks like. This is what it looks like. That's my publisher. Where is he at? He's not even in there. I know all these people. It's crazy. It's not a public, it's not meant for this. It's a fire hazard every time we do it. This is a library. This is a library. But people are hungry for representation. They want to see themselves reflected back at them, right? Look how joyous. That's my publisher right there. He published Bill Campbell to the right there. He published Blue Hand Mojo and Box of Bones. So this is, so the four founders are myself, Jerry Craft, who is now an amazing children's book creator. He's like best-selling author. I think he was the first cartoonist to get the Newbery Award. It's really amazing. Also, Deirdre Holman and Dr. Jonathan Gales, who is down at Georgia State. He's a cultural anthropologist. So we started this with the Schomburg. So check this out. That's David F. Walker. This is the line to get in. They're not going to get Beyonce tickets. They're not going to get like a new iPhone, right? They're trying to get in there to see the stories. Because if you think about it, I'm going to end with this. We have serviced now over 80,000 kids. Isn't that wild? Over 80,000 kids. And they never have to know what it's like to not be the center of a story. And I'm going to end with that. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your time. Now, you guys have questions and stuff? All right.
So I just came in a little late, but it's kind of crazy and almost amazing that you're in a place and a time when you didn't know you was going to be there, that it keyed in on something that you genuinely have been thinking about or been doing.
Yeah.
So I know a talented, up-and-coming graphic multimedia artist that it's really difficult for someone who hasn't already been mentored into that to find the avenue of getting into it other than a traditional way. Like you can go to college and get a multimedia graphics, whatever degrees out there, I'm not familiar with that, but that's one way. If that way is not necessarily for you, what would be a recommendation for someone who's young and has a passion, want to get involved in that type of thing and draw from their own personal talent that they've grown over that period of time?
Yeah. My whole piece is like you find your tribe.
I got you.
You know what I'm saying? You try to find people that are like-minded. One of these things is now we have the hyperglobal meganet that connects us, right? We didn't have like, these resources that we have now. You have YouTube University, you can follow people, you can do research, I mean, we have a supercomputer in our pockets, so we can do that really easily. You reach out and you follow and you learn, and try to find like-minded individuals. You go to people where the people at. So one of the things that really changed my life was when me and Damian Duffy, who did the Kindred book, we went to the East Coast Black Age of Comics Convention, because we wanted to find black creators, and that's what they were. And so we made friends with them. We became part of the community, and it's about community, Sometimes going the non-traditional route is the best way to go, because a lot of times the institutions will kind of separate you, right? Because we're notoriously bad about putting people in silos, you know what I'm saying? I don't like silos, obviously, right? Very interdisciplinary scholar. I don't even really fit into a lot of different categories because of that, because I'm interested in the work, I'm interested in the people. So you try to find people who will look out for you, and I think finding your tribe, finding your people, I think it's really important. You have to understand, the idea of the lone auteur that's a fallacy. Like, I'm a genius and I have made this thing by myself. No, that's not true. You are the index of multitudes. You have to remember, you're working always with everything else that's come before you. And so what you have to do is you have to find those spaces, whether you're shy, or you got to come out that shyness. If you're shy, if you have to listen to yourself and actually figure out how to connect with people. Does that make sense? I mean, hopefully hopefully helpful. Yeah. So I feel like for me, when I started working with people that were like-minded, that's when I started to blossom. When I started to find, when I found Damien, when I found Stacey Robinson, when I found my friend Mike Dando, when I found David Brame, Yatasha Womack, it started to become a community. Yep. And also the other thing is to try to create venues like that. One of the reasons why I create venues is because it attracts people, So that's the other thing. Maybe you become, I started off as a curator. I didn't say, I'm gonna create a new character for Marvel. That wasn't what my intent was. My intent was to create connection. So yeah, hope that makes sense. I mean, that's a great question. And it's difficult, it's not an easy answer,
Yeah, thank you, I appreciate that.
Thank you.
One more.
Yes.
I recently started writing a book. I ran across technology that will allow me to not have to sit with a pen and paper, that I could just go straight from my thoughts and my memory. But now I'm stuck at a place where, what do I do with what I put into this and all the stuff I built up to this point? Where do I go next? Who would be someone that would look at this and tell me what to do with it?
Do you have an editor?
When
Okay.
I tell you, I spoke to an AI app that I came across. It began to write my thoughts and put it in, and I fine-tuned it as I went along, even down to images that I pulled from actual people, that they slightly changed the image, and of course I changed the names. But it speaks to growing up in Brooklyn during the height of the crack cocaine era and how it affected families in those communities.
Okay.
Specifically how it affected me and my family. So I guess I'll be the key character because I'm narrating the story of what's going on in my life from that period of time to present. So that's where I'm at.
Well, I would definitely try. There's a lot of freelance editors out there. I would definitely get the manuscript edited and looked at by folk who can help you with that. You can also try self-publishing, of course. You can do Kickstarter. There's other ways like that. Yeah, the publishing industry is odd. So yes, but definitely having someone look at it is a good first step,
So you are sitting in this room today, and there are so many kids in here, obviously, who kind of look up to your artwork, but you look like them. You paint pictures of things that look like them as a way of representation. Talk about how that makes you feel to kind of be inspiring younger people who can finally see themselves in something.
Thank you for that. That is what I do. That's why I do what I do. One of the things I mentioned early on, and I keep mentioning this, is coming up in Florida, Mississippi. I went to East Florida High, which is now I guess East Florida Middle School. I don't even know what it is now. I think that's a magnet school. Never mind. That's a tributary. I recently did a visit at a library that's run by my friend Maurice Broaddus, who is a famous science fiction writer. And I spoke to a bunch of kids, just like I'll be doing Monday. I'm speaking to a lot of kids. And it made me realize that I was sitting there between periods, that when I was at East Florida High School, I can remember nobody coming by to see us, Recruiter came, that's why I ended up in the military for a little bit. Recruiters were there, but there was no dentist. You know, I didn't see anybody who was a storyteller. I didn't know a librarian came to talk to us. There was no doctors, there was no lawyers, there was no engineers that came to see us in this little town, you know? So I came to see you. I hope somebody started cutting onions again. Stop it. What are you making?
Hey,
Besides me crying.
you're more important than you think. You know, when you need a dentist, you really need a dentist.
Listen,
So,
you know what?
don't-
For real. That's right.
but anyway, now two quick questions. One is on the art. I don't want to make you go all the way back to the beginning, but on about your third page when you first started showing the Afrofuturistic
Oh, the
art.
cyborg images?
Yes,
Yeah.
there was a image of a woman
Yeah.
with a banana on her back.
Yes.
Was that a take on Josephine Baker?
You better believe it.
Okay,
You
all right.
better
I
believe it.
I
That's
had to make
exactly
sure
right.
of that.
So what I was doing was I was sampling images that we remember. You know, like a lot of those images are from history. You know, what I was doing was the other thing too is like the technique. I wanted it to look like woodcuts. You know, so one of my mentors, Tom Kovacs, God rest him, was a printmaker. Right, he worked in wood. You know, he was Polish. You know, he learned how to read from Superman comics. You know, and he was my teacher at University of Illinois. And you know, I wanted to honor that particular process. You know, of actually, like, I wanted to look like I had made it with wood. You know, like, but I also wanted to look futuristic. You know, and I have to say, like, to this day, I feel like it's probably like the most like honest work I've made. You know, it feels like the theory and the practice actually came together, you know, and they still like speak to me, and because that's where it started my journey to get here, you know, and it actually still like, you know, it's part of my practice. So,
Okay.
yeah, but that was Josephine Baker. Yeah.
Okay, just
yeah.
want to make sure. But
Yeah.
the other thing is that, you know, with what you've created in these forums that you talk about, I'm wondering, is there any thought to maybe doing, because I'm sure there's a hungry audience out there, is there any thought about doing a forum among the HBCUs, maybe doing an HBCU tour or something like that? I think there'll be a great audience.
I
for it.
definitely need to do that. I've spoken at a bunch of HBCUs, but there needs to be something a little bit more organized, probably like beyond my bandwidth, with my little neurospicy brain, you know? So, but it definitely, you're right, it definitely needs to happen. The other thing too is that with the Megascope work that we do, like we've been around for 5 years, we published 10 books. I'm very excited about the Emmett Till graphic novel. It's a beautifully painful, you know, amazing book. So hopefully maybe we can get something like that going to kind of expose more people to what we're doing as a collective, you know? So, yeah. No, thank you for being here. I'm here for you.
We're really proud of you.
Oh, see, don't start it, because I'm gonna make me look like Charlie Brown with the, you know, anyway.
I think we've got time for one more question before we separate and head into the gallery.
Okay.
Thank you for being here. My
you.
question is for your world building. What advice would you give to a young artist who's trying to do an original story?
I would say, like, think about the audience, think about the problem you want to solve. I look at stories as problem solving, right? So, you know, if you have issues with climate change, if you want to talk about bullying, if you want to talk about, like, you know, data mining, whatever, come up with a metaphor or a solution that could be articulated in the world that you want to create. The other thing to think about too is that how does that world like use language? How does it use technology? How does it use like, how do people make food? You know, that kind of stuff, right? I often use J.R.R. Tolkien as an example, who created, you know, The Hobbit and, you know, the Tale of Two Towers. What's the name of Return to King? What's the big name? Lord of the Rings. Jeez. Wow. Thank you. Lord of the Rings, right? So you know what his profession was, right? He was a linguist, right? So all of his work was based off of language. So Elven was a language. It was a written form. And so one of the reasons that becomes immersive is because it feels real, you know? And so what you do is you take the world that we live in and then you actually like kind of extrapolate that into this fantasy world, right? Think about how it would be if you start creating from that standpoint. Create from you too. That's the other thing I would tell a young, like, you start with yourself. Like, my son is the inspiration for this character. My son has autism, he's 7, his name's Jackson, like I said. Kenny also is neurodivergent, you know, and I want people to see themselves in the characters, you know. Do your research, actually, too. Read other books that you want to emulate. You know what I'm saying? You want to look at, like, how did this person do it? You know, how did this person do it? And then figure out how you find your own voice. You know what I'm saying? You kind of like might, you know, imitate at first, you know, but then what happens is that you stumble into yourself, you know, and that's what happens. Like, if you keep writing, if you keep making work, you eventually will find yourself in the work. It's so powerful too. So, you know, that's a great question. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
To learn more and support the Mississippi Arts and Entertainment Experience, go to msarts.org.